Our next recipient could be with us today and is sitting on stage. Mr. Paul Harner from the Akron District, who's hosting our state finals with the Akron Flags. After graduating from Copley High School almost 40 years ago in June of 1981, and with 4 years of incomparable speech and communication training from the best of all coaches, Paul Harner attended Duke University, first as an undergraduate, then as a law student. After law school, he first served as a clerk to Judge Dixon Phillips of the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, and then embarked on a 30-plus-year career as a corporate bankruptcy and insolvency lawyer. He has had an opportunity as a result to lead successful cases in industries across the United States economy, including those of American Airlines, Macy's, Six Flags Entertainment, Bloomingdale's, Trans World Airlines, Molly Corp, and others. He appears and argues cases in trial and appellate courts across the country and could not have been remotely equipped to do so absent the training and mentorship he received as a high school student. I'm going to go a little off script for a second, Paul, but in doing some research about your career, he's also one of the most researched and sought after experts in his field. Attorneys from around the country, and I would imagine around the world, seek out your advice. In recent years, Paul has also turned to philanthropic activities. He currently serves as the chair of the American College of Bankruptcy Foundation, which annually provides approximately 50 grants to pro bono legal service organizations devoted to assisting the indigent in navigating our bankruptcy system. He also is a co-founder and board member of Catholic Renewal, an organization of New York area restructuring professionals, annually raising funds for homeless relief efforts. When founded in 2010, Catholic Renewal raised $65,000 in that endeavor. 9 years later, it raised $1.5 million. Paul is absolutely certain that his speech training so many years ago now translates to success in dialing for dollars. One final biographical note, and one that relates directly to the importance of communication skills. Paul is the proud father of 5 children, now 29, 26, 15, 12, and 6. And he says, if you can converse with a kindergartner, you have had really good speech training. It is my honor to invite Mr. Paul Harner to speak to you as a distinguished alumni award winner. Mr. Harner.
Thanks so much, very much. I really am honored and humbled by this, and I must say that as surprised as I was some weeks ago when I first learned about it, I was delighted because it was going to give me an opportunity to come home to Ohio High School Forensics, and let me say in all sincerity that I really do feel at home here. As dumb as you all look, my goodness. I am an extraordinarily blessed man. First and foremost, by my wife, Michelle, who could not be here today because quite appropriately she is giving a speech in Washington, D.C., and by my 5 children. But reflecting back to when I first began competing 43 years ago, my chief blessings in that context were my coaches. The head coach at Copley High School at the time, and still the emeritus coach, is a member of your Hall of Fame. She was a national champion extemper at the collegiate level, and could not have been a better coach for me, but far more importantly, Coach Alice wrote, please stand. Alice. Coach Alice Rowe became in succeeding years not just a mentor and a coach, but a lifelong friend. And I really cannot express to you my love, admiration, and gratitude to her, and frankly to her entire family. Coaching runs in the family, by the way. Shannon Rowe, her daughter, is now the head coach at Copley High School. At the time, again 43 years ago, Coach Rowe had a high-class problem. And that was that she was raising a young family, but the problem it created was that she could not drive to tournaments on the weekends. So she had to enlist the help of an assistant coach to do so. This notwithstanding the fact, by the way, that we were a team of one at the time. But somebody had to drive to the tournaments because I started when I was 14. I could have taken a bicycle, I suppose. But the assistant coach that she hired was himself a state debate champion at the college level, attending Muskingum College, and happily, he was also my dad. And he's here today. Dad, I love you so much. Can you stand up? Very briefly, while I have a captive audience, there's no denying that the kind of speech communications training that I received as a high school student, not just from my coaches, but from so many others, even other competitors, has served me well. After all, for a living, I try to persuade people. I make speeches. I sometimes have to even cajole judges and opponents, and sometimes even my own clients. But the speech communication skill that perhaps was the most important and that seems to be lost on a lot of people these days was the active listening and empathy that comes behind an effective communication and effective persuasion. I must tell you that I am increasingly disturbed and distressed every single day by the extent to which our discourse, both national and even social, has become discordant and disagreeable. And I think that the simple explanation for it is that in many, many cases we have all stopped listening to each other. It's really a shame, isn't it? We just don't listen. We don't empathize. All of you are probably, at least the students here, are all too young to remember what I thought was one of the greatest television series ever, which was The West Wing, unless you've been streaming it on Netflix. In the very last episode, in the final season of that television series, there is an absolutely wonderful scene in which outgoing President Bartlett's secretary, who was wonderfully played by Lily Tomlin, if you saw the series, is counseling the incoming President Santos' new secretary. And she says to her, describing her most important function, which is to be the gatekeeper to the Oval Office, she says to the new, doe-eyed, eager young secretary, your most frequent answer to any question will be no. Say it firmly, but say it with empathy. I implore all of you, especially as you go through the kind of training that's so valuable to you here and in these competitions, and that you're receiving in your individual high schools, not to try to persuade or to speak at high decibel, or policy debaters at high speed, or most importantly, disagreeably. Instead, listen. Make your argument based on what you know about your opponent's argument, but also make it based on what you have heard them say and what you know their experiences to be, because they undoubtedly are different than your own. If you do that and try not to be disagreeable, we can all communicate, I believe, far more effectively than we do on a daily basis now. Thank you very much for this. I really am truly honored. And by the way, good luck to every single one of you. There are 1,100 people competing in this room, and there's a state champion inside every one of you. Thank you very much.
At this time, I would like to welcome Alice Rote to the lectern to present her student his award, recognizing him as a distinguished alumnus of the Ohio Speech and Debate Association.
I know we're all anxious to finish, but I must say something off script as well. Paul's wife, Michelle, the Honorable Michelle Harner, judge in the, I'm not sure which district, federal bankruptcy court, could not be here today, but she asked me if I would mention that she, her children, and all of Paul's family are incredibly proud, not just of this award, this is nice, but of all the things that Paul does and the person that Paul has become. And I want to say that I take some pride in that as well. May I please then present this award to Paul Harner.